Hello, everyone, and welcome to Superman Homepage Live, brought to you by supermanhomepage.com, the number one Superman fan site in the world. In this, our March 3rd, 2025 show, we're going to be covering a range of topics, including our tribute to the late, great Gene Hackman, who passed away this week. We've got some other movie stuff to discuss. I got Michael and Mark jumping in on my Steve's sanity check to give me their views on one particular theory about the upcoming movie. We've got some action figure news to get through as well, so plenty to get through in tonight's topics. But firstly, let me introduce my co-host, Michael Bailey. Hello, Michael. How are you?
Doing okay, Steve. How are you?
Yeah, very well. And Mark Lax, how are you?
Steve, Michael, how are you?
Yeah, doing well. Thank you very much. We have plenty of topics to get through tonight, but we also like to hear from our live listeners, live viewers. And Michael, there is a way for them to get involved in the show tonight. How do they do that?
It's dirt simple. All they do is go to supermanhomepage.com/live and press the call now button. There they will be taken to the green room where they can watch the show while we're talking about it and waiting to have them on. You can also use the QR code next to me on the other side, Mike. That side. Yep, very good. You can just click on, to use your camera to scan that, and you'll be taken to the same room. Now, a couple of things. If you are using a desktop to watch the show and are using an external speaker to listen to us, you're going to need to mute that if we have you on, because we're on a bit of a delay. And if you're using your smartphone, please use a headset, AirPods, whatever, because speakerphone does not really work all that well.
Indeed. And if you're a little bit shy and don't want to get on the phone tonight to talk to us, then feel free to participate in the comments there on both YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We're across all those tonight, so broadcasting live for the next hour. You can have your say, throw us a question, post a comment. Michael and I and Mark will be able to keep an eye on all those views that you have, anything you might say, and we'll be able to react to them as we go along tonight. We want to thank our sponsors and patrons who we cannot do this show without. And we've got a new person on board at the moment. We want to thank Douglas Meacham, John Patrick Van Pelt, Tina Murray, and Rick Schutzow. Thank you so much for your support. Apologise to Rick for not mentioning his name last week. It was remiss of me to forget him off the list, but thank you for jumping on board. Those four people are why we are able to go live each week, thanks to their financial support. So thank you so much to those four people for sponsoring the show. We really appreciate you buying us the coffee this week, and your support does not go unnoticed or unwelcome. And if you'd like to join those fine folks and be a supporter of the show and keep us running, then all you have to do is click the join button there on YouTube. There are different levels of membership with different levels of perks. You can also go to patreon.com/Superman homepage, and the top tier membership is where you'll get your name read out at the beginning and end of every live show that we do. There are other different levels of memberships where you can be able to, a tip jar, simple as small as $1, and you get special member bonuses that are not available to people who are either not members or are on the free base of our membership, including Steve's Superman sanity check, which I will talk about later on. But let's get into tonight's topics. As I mentioned off the top of the show, the main reason we're here tonight is to pay tribute to the late, great Gene Hackman, who passed away this past week at the age of 95. He was, of course, Lex Luthor in 3 Superman films, Superman 1, Superman 2, and Superman 4. But there were some kind of not necessarily suspicious, but strange circumstances surrounding his death, which are still under investigation. And first and foremost, I just want to send out our condolences to his family and friends at his tragic loss. 95 is obviously a great, ripe old age to live to, but nevertheless, when you lose a loved one, doesn't matter how old they are, it's very difficult. Michael.
Yeah, we have a lot. There seem to be a lot of people wanting to focus on what happened, and I don't think that's appropriate for this show. We don't usually get into rumors and stuff like that.
Mm.
I I was kind of saddened by it, mainly because we keep losing cast members of Superman the movie. I
Yeah,
mean,
so
we're
true.
down to the Phantom Zone villains and Jimmy Olsen. So that's kind of sad. But
Miss
also,
Chestnut,
Who was that,
the
Valley
what?
Mark?
Prime.
Oh yeah, and Valerie.
No,
Yes.
Valerie Bryant. Yes, sorry, Miss Tessmacher. You're absolutely right. I apologize.
I
Uh,
mean, just
but
it's still like,
I think the bigger thing is that despite the fact that he was Lex Luthor, that was like a drop in the bucket of this man's career.
Oh, 100%.
Bonnie and Clyde, The French Connection, Young Frankenstein, Mississippi Burning, which I was actually watching today.
Great movie.
And there's an entire scene where he's interrogating Jonathan Kent from the new movie.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
so that I was,
oh,
yeah, the guy
Oh,
the guy
okay.
who's playing Jonathan Kent was in that as one of the suspects.
That's not in
So
the barber shop, is
and
it?
no, in the
Oh,
barber
okay.
shop is
That's a
where
great
he
one.
is either interrogating Arlie Ermy or Brad Dourif. Uh, but it's and Hoosiers and the Replacements and Enemy of the
Unforgiven.
State and Crimson Tide and Unforgiven and like this man had a career that defies the fact that he was voted in his acting class as least likely to succeed.
Hmm.
So it's sad on such a number of levels, but at the same time, there's so much that you can go back to and watch with him,
Hmm.
where he's and if you want to make Superman connections, he did a scene with Bill Church from Lois and Clark in Young Frankenstein. He was Cat Grant's dad in Birdcage. I mean, we could do this. I could probably go through each film and make some kind of reference. Uh, and I mean, wasn't he in like The Quick and the Dead with Jarrell? I mean, it just doesn't end. But no, it's really sad, mainly because if we had found, if we'd gotten the news and it was he passed away in his sleep or he passed away after a brief illness, we would all been like sad. But 95 is a good year to make to. But now that there's like really weird circumstances to it,
Hmm.
worry it's going to taint it
Yeah,
to a certain extent.
I know where you're
Like we're
coming
not going
from.
to focus on what a great actor he was, or just the fact that he got to live his life on his own terms. We're going to be talking about the mysterious way he died.
Yeah, and for those who are unaware of the circumstances, his wife, who's about 30 years younger than him, was found dead in another room. One of their dogs was also found dead. I believe there were pills scattered around her body, and then he was also found in another room. And they're trying to work out the timeline and the circumstances. It's not for us to speculate, but people are obviously found that very kind of concerning and disturbing. But there was obviously a series of events there. I'm guessing she was his primary carer because of his age and infirmity, and so if she's passed away, then there's nobody else to take care of him, and that's sad, but not a nice way to go. But you got to wonder, where are the other people in his life who didn't check in on him for a week or whatever. It's as they say, as I think somebody else wrote in a tweet, check on your elderly neighbours from time to time, folks. Doesn't hurt. These people can sometimes be unforgotten people that are quietly left to themselves, and sadly sometimes they need other people to check in on them.
just to quickly say, I was watching a YouTube videos, a comedian who has a podcast. I guess he's had this for quite a few years, and this is actually going several years back, and he's
Mm.
saying he wanted to watch an old action movie from the 70s, so he watched The French Connection, and he said he thought it was terrible, it was so slow and boring, and all Gene Hackman does is yell, and all he does is yell in all his movies. He's not a good actor, he's just not a good actor. And I'm sitting there like, what? Have you seen this movie and this movie and this movie? Who are you? And it wasn't like he said, I think he's a bad actor. he's saying he's a bad actor. He's not a good
Wow.
actor. And I'm like, this is one of the most brilliant actors that has ever lived. Okay, I don't mean to gush like that, but he was just brilliant. I think in almost everything, whether it was playing Lex Luthor or like you said, Mississippi Burning to Birdcage. When we know he's good at comedy.
Yeah.
Um, you know, everything that he's done. I mean, Crimson Tide was just an incredible movie. I mean, just I can go on and on, but things like this, that really, gets in my craw. But the truth is, this is just a fantastic actor that, even though he hasn't acted in years and years, it still is leaving a tremendous hole in the fabric of cinema.
Mm.
And you know, yes, he lived a to a great age. And whether to say he had a good long life, well, I think relatively, you don't
Mm-hmm.
know personal problems with in a person's life to say, oh, they lived a good life. But I think from what we know up to this point anyway, he did live a good life. And it was, he lived to 95, but that doesn't, it doesn't take away, from the fact, doesn't matter how old he is.
Mm.
It doesn't take away the fact that, he's just going to leave this big hole,
Yeah.
and considering the circumstances, it makes it even harder,
Mm.
you know, but it's just, he was just an incredible actor and somebody that I admired.
Yes. And there are people out there who are just for the sake of controversy, just trying to get views, and it's not an ethical way to go around getting views to your page or your videos or whatever, just to rip on someone for the
Mm.
sake of doing it to be controversial. Like, find a better way to make a living for yourself. But Nostalgic Pod Blast says Gene retired in 2004 from acting due to, in part, to a heart issue. So yeah, he hasn't been on our screens for quite some time. Was out and about in the community a few times. Got caught, walking about outside his property, and people would. And it was recently there was a autograph signing that I remember Jim Bowers making mention of. So it wasn't that long ago that he was still kind of active in some ways, but yeah, will leave a great hole in many people's lives. So our thoughts and prayers go out to those who were closest to him and his wife. Hope there's some clarity for them in the coming days and weeks. But yeah, that is our tribute to Gene Hackman, and a super chat from John Patrick Van Pelt, who says, wasn't Lex Luthor a two-dimensional character before they cast Gene Hackman? Well, there's a lot of people who will have their thoughts on Gene Hackman's version of Lex Luthor. For many, it wasn't necessarily a version we've ever really seen in the comic books. That's never really translated to the comic books. A lot of Christopher Reeve's mannerisms and his visual appearance, the Fortress of Solitude, a lot of those kinds of things translated across from the movie to the comic books in later years. But Gene Hackman's version of Lex Luthor never really made its way into the comic book folklore. It was always really I think, you had the John Byrne version in the mid to late 80s that really became what people considered Lex Luthor. Any thoughts on Gene Hackman's version of Lex Luthor? Not necessarily how he performed, but the version of Lex Luthor that we saw.
This isn't mine, but I was talking with some people yesterday, and one of them, Rob O'Connor of the All Star Superfan podcast, pointed out that if you look at the John Byrne version of Lex Luthor, there is a lot of Gene Hackman baked in there. It's not like a direct translation, but there are elements of basically the post crisis Superman is the Christopher Reeve Superman and the George Reeves Superman kind of mashed together and thrown out into the comic book world. Uh, which is how I've come to kind of see it. So whether or not he was a two-dimensional character before that, no. If you're talking like the version we saw in Superman versus the Atom Man serial, everybody was a two-dimensional character in that movie. That's that's kind of a that's not the deepest Superman adaptation we've ever gotten, but in terms of the comic books, absolutely not. He everyone gets caught on this thing of, well, he turned evil because he went bald, but it's just like, okay, tell me you haven't read those stories without telling me you haven't read those stories. If that was the case, two and a half of us would have gone evil like a long time ago on this show. So, but it there was a lot going on. There was this whole thing with Lexor and the planet that thought of Lex as a hero, and the just the depths of the friendship that Lex and Superboy had before he went evil.
Mm.
His sister who wanted nothing to do with him, and his family who abandoned him. So it's unfair to kind of say that he was a two-dimensional character. What he was in Superman the movie was a Bond villain. He wasn't really a comic book villain at all. You could have you could have renamed him something else, put him in a Bond movie, and that probably would have worked just as well.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, he was my first, pretty much, I guess, my first live action Lex Luthor. And growing up, he was my number one Lex Luthor. As time has gone on, there have been others, and I've changed, I've changed my mind a bit. But he was still, he still, even though he was funny in the role and commanded the role, he still just showed how evil he
Mm.
he, he was. Even in his humor, you could just see the evil that this man was. And yeah, his look, his suits and his cigar and all of that, did that transcend a little bit to John Burns' version? Yeah, it possibly,
Mm.
but um, obviously, as far as the comics, I mean, he's there's a reason why he's considered Superman's greatest villain, and there's so many different stories before the pre crisis.
Mm.
So many different stories of Lex Luthor even being more on the side of good and being extremely evil, or doing something just for his sister. There's so many different stories of Luthor that you can't really say he's a two dimensional character, because there's so
No.
much going on. There may be certain stories where he does seem a little two dimensional, but there's other stories where he is just just seems
A lot of depth.
flesh and blood.
Yeah. Another question from John Patrick Van Pelt, another super chat. Thank you, John. Do you guys think in the new Superman movie coming out in July that James Gunn will make a tribute to him at the beginning or end of the new film? It's always possible, I guess, but
Yeah,
um, you know, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I mean, I guess there is a possibility of that happening.
yeah. More. I would put more money on it more if it was closer to the release, if
Yeah,
he had passed then. But I don't know. It's just are you not going to dedicate it to all the other people who have
yeah,
played these characters that have passed away as
Yeah.
well? I mean,
yeah.
I'm not trying to take anything away from Gene Hackman,
No,
but do you dedicate it to Christopher Reeve, or do you let the cameo of his son stand as kind of the homage to him in that? So yeah, like I don't think so, but
I don't think so
like
either.
Steve said, could be.
Yeah, probably not necessary.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
don't. Yeah, I don't think they're gonna. It's gonna be dedicated to Gene Hackman, and
No,
that's it. You can't really do that.
no. All right. Well, speaking of the new film, we got a new image from James Gunn on the 1 year anniversary of them filming in Svalbard, where they did all the snow scenes. We now know, obviously, he crashes in the snow and Crypto comes and he says, "Take me home." Not much to look at here, but we're getting a look at the hard packed snow with Superman's boots and a bit of the cape and costume. But more just a kind of marking of the 1 year anniversary of them starting that filming there. And I think it was also the 1 year anniversary of them releasing the first image of David Corenswet as Superman, which we will be talking about shortly. But any comments on this?
No, it's the 1 year anniversary of that close up on the S. Uh,
Oh, that's right. That's
More
right.
than
Yes, you
anything,
are correct.
Ah,
and when I saw this, I'm like, is this like the picture that accidentally got taken when the camera was pointed at the ground when they were taking that picture? I just it's a bizarre one, but I still kind
That's
of
the
dig
one you're
it
talking about.
in all honesty.
yeah,
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, well,
Now we're
someone's
going
dropped
into the S.
someone's dropped the camera on both occasions, and it's taken a snapshot of the chest, and then it's taken a
Yeah.
snapshot of his shoes.
Yep.
So
So,
yeah,
yeah.
but
artistic
it's a
choices.
nice some good detail on the boots at least.
Yeah, would have been cold.
Yeah, just your basic Superman standing in the snow picture.
All right, so there's just that image that not much to mention or talk about there, but it is interesting nevertheless. But speaking of David Corenswet, who is playing Superman, he has an interview with him from Esquire magazine. For some reason, the Spanish version of Esquire's website was published this past week, and there was a lot of questions asking him about his new job as the face of Boss Fragrances. But as for the Superman side of things, they asked him if there was any doubts about playing Superman and what he looks forward to as far as the character is concerned, and he said, um, from his Superman is you can expect a very particular vision, spiced up with some truly wonderful elements and performances. I hope the public sees that I've lived up to expectations in this. Any doubts? He said. He says, yeah, when I think about any doubts, he says, I ask myself, what intonations would Harrison Ford give to this sentence? Although it may seem untrue, it is very useful for me to make some important decisions in my day to day life in this case, too. So he's using Harrison Ford's kind of way of acting as a kind of touchstone to inform his own performances, which is interesting. I know he's a big
Yeah,
Star Wars fan.
it's an interesting way of saying what like what actor do you look up to the most,
Yeah, right.
without actually being asked that question. So, and Harrison Ford's not a bad role model to look at. So,
Yeah, I don't see a problem with first of all Harrison Ford, all the roles she's played, and you can even think. I mean, to me, I would think is Indiana Jones
Yeah.
might be a little bit more along the line of trying, as Superman, trying to look for certain things in Indiana Jones the way he played it, and that that I think would make a lot of sense. And if it's his favorite actor, obviously, it would. I understand that he wants to try to make some of those decisions that he's made.
Hmm. So yeah, as far as where Superman might go in the future, he says, I don't think it's up to me to say that. It's up to James Gunn, who has a great imagination. I'm only there where I'm needed to say what's written, although he doesn't. This doesn't always happen. So yeah, but it would be nice for him to continue playing the role moving forward. So you can read the full interview at esquire.com.
I
Rick
uh,
says,
I want
sorry,
to.
yes, Michael.
Sorry, I just wanted to address something in the comments right now. People are talking that Gunn might be doing reshoots. I don't think they're reshoots, or in they're not reshoots as in he's reshooting parts of the film. It seems like he's doing more pickup shots.
Yep.
Uh, in the editing process of a film, there's when you're watching the rough cut, there's sometimes where something isn't clear and they want to add like a line of dialogue, or if they want to shoot like a like something to bridge one scene to the other.
Yes.
So when they're what he's talking about is just stuff to kind of clean up the movie, not to wholesale reshoot parts of the film. So
Yes.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to make
I was
that
about
point
to.
since it was in the
No,
comments.
very good. I was going to actually reference Rick's comment about he saw that Gunn might be doing
Oh,
reshoots. As you said, it's more of insert shots, pickups, things that help bridge certain scenes and clarify certain things. So it's not necessarily wholesale reshoots to be concerned about, folks. So yeah, don't get overly. People see these things, hear these things, and suddenly start freaking out and panicking, or using it as a method of saying, "See, it's going to be crap." Um, they're already getting bad vibes or what have you. It's nothing about that. Every film goes through these kinds of things where they are doing little pickups or added dialogue or whatever that they need to do to enhance the story that they're trying to tell, and that's already in place. As far as the story they're trying to tell, you can already pre-order Superman the official script book. This won't come out until I think it's October, but nevertheless, it's available to pre-order already. October 21st, it comes out. We don't even have a cover yet, but just using this graphic as a stopgap measure until we do get an official cover. But it's $29.99 US. Expected to arrive October 21st. Experience Superman like never before with this deluxe version of the film's thrilling script. Follow the Man of Steel early in his career as he faces off against Lex Luthor and learns how to stay a hero in an often unheroic world. Featuring film stills that add visual depth to the story alongside behind the scenes insights, Superman the official script book is an immersive tribute to the last son of Krypton's journey from the page to the screen.
I'm kind of excited for this. I like having those things. I
Yeah.
remember buying the one for Superman Returns and reading
Yes.
like the changes that were made to that film. So it's always kind of a nice to see of what might have been if they decided to stick with the script.
Yeah. Really interesting. I like those behind the
Yeah,
scenes kind of things. Mark.
yeah. I mean, I do too. I don't know if this is something I'm going to pick up, but I do. I do like to see the things that things are crossed out and things that are just why they cut this thing out, why they cut that thing out. But I don't know if I'm going to pick it up, but we'll see. You know,
Yeah,
it's
it'll be interesting.
October, so I can change my mind.
Well, that's the thing. If they've already solicited it, then it's probably already in print run and publication. So and you wonder, with pickups and things happening, and how which version of the
Yeah.
script it will actually be, because as you say, Michael, the ones that have come out for previous Superman films have not been exactly what we've seen translated onto the screen, and even in the editing stages, they decide sometimes that they need to mix and match certain scenes in different order to be able to better tell a particular storyline. So what ends up being on paper doesn't necessarily always end up that way in the order of scenes in the film. So it is always interesting to get that kind of behind the scenes look at where they were going at one stage and what they ended up with at the end. So I would definitely be picking that up from a personal perspective. So really looking forward to that. Mind the Gap says, remember the days of novelizations and comic adaptations with different story elements? Yeah, I do remember that. I think it's not that long ago. I think with Superman Returns we got that. Yeah, they are always interesting. Even Man of Steel, I think there was there was official movie novelization which had
Yeah.
different scenes in there that were not part of the movie, but helped explain the movie. We did a whole FAQ about Man of Steel because there were elements of the film that were confusing to some people, and they're well fleshed out in the novelization.
Yes,
Yeah,
sometimes.
go ahead, Mark.
No, no, I was just going to say sometimes it's really good to read the novelization because there are so many different things in there. And it's not always just things that were left out of the actual movie that were in the book because they got it from the original script. It's also the author, interpreting certain
Yeah,
things, as well, which is what part of it is, not just taking the script and just doing it in prose form. So sometimes novelizations are really fun to read.
Yeah, I just there's not as much of a place for them anymore, unfortunately.
People
You
don't
do
read.
get them. It's not so much that; it's that at one point they served as a way to take the movie home.
Right.
And now, with movies being available digitally like several months after they leave theaters, and they're not in theaters as long as they used to be either. Like, I remember back in the day, movies ran until like the wheels fell off. And they just didn't make as much money on them as they were, so they finally kind of moved it out for the next one. And here, they're in theaters for a very short period of time, and then I mean, going sometimes they're digitally available when they're in theaters.
Yeah.
Wicked was you could rent it, and it was still playing in theaters. So it's like one of those things where you don't have to. Man of Steel got one. I know Dark Knight Rises got one, but I don't think the Star Wars films have as
Yeah.
well. But I think that's more tradition with them than anything else.
Yeah.
But if they release a novelization, will I buy it? Absolutely. I would also hope that they would have like an Audible version,
Yes.
because I like to experience books more listening to them these days than sitting down and reading them. But yeah, I'd love it. Comic book adaptation, no. And here's the thing: I have rarely liked comic book adaptations of movies. Going back to when I was a little kid, there's always something disappointing about them. You cannot capture a film in comic book form, unless you're, again, Star Wars. So I remember the adaptation for Superman Returns was kind of disappointing. Like, the art was fine, the writing was okay, but was it as good as the movie? Well, with that movie probably, but still. So, and we didn't get one for Man of Steel,
Mm.
because again, I don't think people buy those things anymore.
Yeah, all we did get was that story about the super or the Kara, and
Yeah.
being people thinking that might have been the person who was in that open pod and all those kinds of things. That's where it kind of led us to go with Man of Steel. But I agree with you. Comic book adaptations of a film or a story are nowhere near as good, or don't have the same flow and impact. But a novelization is different because it can flesh out. So with a comic book, you're stilting it down to a shortened version with less imagery. Where with a novelization, you can flesh it out and fill out things. So it's kind of going the other way when you're doing a comic book.
Unless you're Superman 4, and then you actually have
More.
more stuff than that was actually in the movie. So, I mean, there's a
Very good. That says a
there's an
lot about the
assembly
film.
cut. There's an assembly cut somebody did with like all the deleted scenes, like putting them back into the movie, and like working the music back in. But there are some deleted scenes we don't have. So in those cases, they just showed, and I actually thought it was cool. I'm not making fun of it. They showed panels from the comics, the comic book adaptation
Yeah.
of like the Metro Club scene. And I'm
Wow.
like, that's a clever way to do it. I mean, I'm sure some people are thinking this is kind of weird, but at least it shows you what the intention of the filmmakers was.
Very cool. All right, we're just over the halfway mark of tonight's show. We're going to take a quick break and then come back on the flip side and get Michael and Mark's view on a Steve's Superman sanity check video that I did, which was for members only. But these guys will give you their views here tonight for free, right after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
We'll be back in a moment with the exciting climax of today's episode. So stand by.
If you're enjoying Superman Homepage Live, then please like and share this video with your family and friends. Also, if you'd like to subscribe to our YouTube channel, then you can click on the bell to receive notifications whenever we post a new video. You can also join our YouTube membership program, just click the join button below. Or you can become a patron and support our website by going to patreon.com/Superman Homepage.
Look, up in the sky.
It's a bird.
It's a plane. No, it's SupermanHomepage.com, the #1 Superman fan site in the world. SupermanHomepage.com, covering the world of Superman from the 1930s to today. News, reviews, rumors, and reports. SupermanHomepage.com for all your Superman comics, TV shows, movies, cartoons, radio shows, and more. Everything you ever wanted to know about the Man of Steel and more. SupermanHomepage.com.
Thanks, Superman Homepage, for all the support over the years. I really appreciate it.
I'm Matt Bomer. I'm the voice of Superman and Superman Unbound, and this is the Superman Homepage.
Right here on Superman Homepage.
Coming from the farthest reaches of the universe to challenge the worst villains on Earth are the most powerful heroes ever in the battle of the Superpowers Collection. Can it be the Supermobile on the attack, the Lexor 7 armed with kryptonite? Will the Supermobile repel those deadly rays?
You bet. Ready for battle. Activate RAM.
New from Kenner's Superpowers Collection. Vehicles and figures with power action, each sold separately. Flying lessons for Penguin, fish bait for Luthor. Can the Supermobile defeat the Lexor 7? You decide.
And we'll talk about action figures in a second, but we are back on Superman Homepage Live for the second half hour of tonight's show. And I'll mention Steve's Superman sanity check, which was an interesting little video that I did in a series that I'm hoping to continue, in which you out there, the fans, recommend a crazy theory or fan idea of whether it be for the movie or anything else that relates to Superman, and I will give you my perspective on that theory. And the one that I did this week was on the idea that the image that we very first saw of, or this image that we saw of David Corenswet's Superman sitting there in the room, putting on his boots, something crazy is going on out the back. The theory was from someone called Melbourne Superman and others out there that this is in fact Bizarro, not Superman, and that's why he's not actively getting out there, because he doesn't care.
No. No, that's not the only thing I'm going to say. I promise. Do I buy into a theory that this Ultraman character might be a Bizarro Superman? I'm more inclined to believe that, simply because that would be an interesting way to bring Bizarro into this new film series. Is it's somehow something that Lex Luthor created, and that maybe I'd almost buy like the shot of the Superman. Like having the can thrown at his head and kind of hunched over in that building that he comes in with Green Lantern. Maybe that would be like Ultraman out of costume. But that being Bizarro, no. I it would be completely disingenuous for James Gunn as the first official shot of the character to show us not the character. That just would be weird.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. And I said in my video that James Gunn has been pretty true to the way he looks at these characters, and if he was going to do Bizarro, wouldn't he do the traditional looking Bizarro with a backward S and the more comic book type of feel to it? Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would never. The last thing in my mind in that picture was that it could be Bizarro. Why? Because he was just sitting there. I mean, is that? I don't know if that exact scene is going to be in the movie. I know the trailer has shown a little bit of it. I still think that scene, that what we saw, that was just really. This is the first picture that was put out just to give us a little hint. This is what the costume is going to look like. It gives us a little hint in the background of what might be going on, outside, and that might be happening in the movie. And I think that's all that really was. And I just, we see the costume. Obviously, we see the costume is all blackened and whatever because of whatever he was fighting. this did not give me an impression that that was telling us that that was Bizarro. That just didn't make any sense. And like Mike said, James Gunn's going to give us that's the very first picture that we see, and it's going to turn out that's actually Bizarro. That doesn't make sense.
I'm with you. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that crazy one. So, yeah, people giving their own thoughts in the comments. So, thank you for that one. That was suggested to me. And if you have another crazy suggestion for a Steve Superman sanity check, if you've seen a rumor out there, doesn't have to necessarily relate to the movie. Could be anything to do with comic books, anything out there about Superman. You see something that someone said about it and you want me to tear it to shreds, only too happy to do that in the next edition of Steve's Superman Sanity Check. Don't hold back. I'm only too happy to rip in. All right, let's get into the regular segments that we do. We're going to start with the super secret. Oh, no, we don't do that at the moment, do we? It's the end of the month.
Nope.
Let's jump into the fan favorite segment of our show. All right, Michael, what was last week's fan favorite question?
What is your favorite episode of the Super Friends cartoons? And Plain Pulling Tom wrote, "Hey folks, great show. I got a badass Crypto shirt, and I've been wearing it before Crypto became famous again. The Crypto Funko Pop is nice too. I got that one as well. As a small Tom, before I started moving more plates than a dishwasher at Golden Corral at the gym, I watched the Super Friends, and my favorite episodes was my first intro of Green Arrow when all the heroes were annoying teenager and those annoying teenagers got shrunk. Green Arrow was the only normal size one. Okay, not so fun fact. Did you know that Earth 3's Ultraman had a super dog named Ultro? Once in the FOS. What is FOS? I don't know what FOS is. I feel like I should know that. Okay. Anyways, Ultraman was beating the hell out of Crypto and bragging how he killed his dog out of sheer boredom. So if all you ever do is who is the most evil Superman villain, that alone is the worst act a villain can do. P.S. I got 3 Superman tattoos. What's the record for us on the homepage?
Well, I think that all us have got added up. All 3 of us have got 0, 0, and 0.
No, I've got one.
Yeah, no, you have one. Mike has one.
Yeah, we did a whole thing about it. We
Yes,
did a whole thing about it, Steve.
Yes, you do too. I do remember now.
Yeah.
Right there. That's right. So
well, there's
yeah,
2 of us. Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Well done.
I remember Mike's tattoo.
I do now too. I remember that. I saw his upper arm, and I was trying to block that out from my memory.
That's true. But... it's just like. Well, it's not like you, Steve, where you're not allowed on school grounds because they have a 0 gun policy. So I'm not as swole as you. So,
but no, I don't have any. Mark, I don't think you do either. No. So yeah, I don't know how. As far as anybody else in the community, anybody listening to us, if you want to add. If you've got more than 3, or how many you've got, we'll keep a tally as we go along. But thank you to Tom. Who was next, Mark, in the fan favorite segment?
Kenny Crowley Jr. wrote, "My favorite episodes of the Super Friends cartoon series. Wow, way too many to choose from. That I must admit I did not see Super Friends until later on, and now more recently on MeTV Tunes. But the intro to the cartoon is amazing. Thanks, guys, for all you do for the Superman Super Family fans community and Superman homepage."
Thank you very much. So thank you to Tom and Kenny. And yes, Michael, FOS, of course, is Fortress of Solitude.
Okay. That I stand corrected. I don't know why I didn't. I was up really early today, y'all.
I was thinking that the character that he was talking about was like his universe, so I didn't realize he was talking about that he was in Superman's universe, beating the hell out of Crypto. So yeah, I'll have to look into that. But thank you to
everyone. But yes, if he killed his dog, he needs to be murdered immediately. I'm kind of glad what happened to him in the John Kent Adventures of Superman's miniseries happened to him.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. Well, that is the fan favorite segment of our show. So thank you to Tom and Kenny for sending those answers in. But Mark, what is our new fan favorite question for this week?
The new question is, what is your favorite episode of the 1988 Ruby Spears Superman animated series?
Yeah, not as many to go through as opposed to the Super Friends, which had many, many iterations over many, many years. The 1988 Ruby Spears cartoon series had just the one season. So info@supermanhomepage.com is the email address to send in your answer to this fan favorite question. What is your favorite episode of the Ruby Spears Superman cartoons? And we will read out those responses when we return to this segment next week. All right. Thank you for the fan favorite segment. Let's jump now into Michael's This Week in History segment.
Come with me now, my son, as we break through the bars of your earthly confinement, traveling through time and space.
Not a whole lot to talk about this week, folks. In all honesty, it was kind of light. I mean, we're going back to 1955 with Superman number 97, which that guy's creepy. I want to move on to 1975 as quickly as possible because I don't really like that guy on the cover. Justice League of America number 119. Winner Takes Earth. I like how non-concerned Batman is in the front. Like he's just like, guys, I got things to do. Gotham is tearing itself apart. 1985, we have Crisis on Infinite Earths number 3. Oh, wait, sorry. We have the year's best comic stories first, which was Blue Ribbon Digest. They did those once a year, showing off the best stories. Superman, of course, is on the cover. We have Crisis on Infinite Earths number 3, which I think was like the first one to feature in any kind of prominent role the Earth 1 Superman coming in to help save the Titans who were rescuing people. And DC Comics presents number 82, I believe, where he teams up with Adam Strange. That's a decent issue. I'm not a big fan of Klaus Janson as an artist, but it's a good team up with Superman and Adam Strange. Jumping ahead to 1995, we have Action Comics number 709, where you have Superman fighting Guy Gardner Warrior, and that actually goes over into Guy Gardner Warrior number 30, which has kind of the other version of that fight with a Tom Grummett cover. And we have Showcase 95 number 4, which featured a story involving the Thorn. I think that was her trapped in an airport, if I'm remembering correctly. Then in 2005, it's kind of a weird mix. We have the Justice League Unlimited number 7, which is the tie-in comic. But then we have Lex Luthor, Man of Steel, number 1, the Brian Azzarello, Lee Bermejo miniseries, which I did not care for.
Yes,
in 2005. I will have to reread that at some point. Brian Azzarello and I do not get along as writer and reader. I'm sure he's a lovely guy that gives money to charity and visits his mom and sends part of his paycheck to his silver-haired mother back home, which is actually his bookie. But yeah, I was not a fan of that. But we also have the 3rd issue of Superman's Strength, which, despite having a Alex Ross cover, does not feature Alex Ross interiors. In 2015, we're just basically wrapping up this Earth 2 thing. We have the Earth 2 number 32, which kind of has Darkseid finally showing up, and Earth 2 World's End number 22, where we are really wrapping up this iteration of those characters. In the real world, on March 3rd, Indy Navarrete, who played Sarah Cushing on Superman and Lois, was born in 2001. Makes me feel kind of old. And John Murphy, who will be doing the music for the new Superman film later this year, was born on that date in 1965. And that's it. That's This Week in History.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that. So, yes, this week in history, very light on with actual birth dates, but John Murphy, the man doing the score for the upcoming film, should be interesting to hear exactly what that score is all about. All right, so that's this week in history. That's those two things out of the way. Just before we move on to the merchandise side of things, if you're living in Australia, Warner Brothers Discovery announced that the Max streaming service, which fans in the US have obviously had for a while now, will finally launch here on March 31st. The new home of HBO Originals, Max Originals, Warner Brothers, the DC Universe, Harry Potter, Discovery, and so much more for the first time, all in one place in Australia. They'll have premium, standard, and ad-supported tiers. So exciting news for fans in Australia. So
which one are you getting, Steve? Are you getting the ad-supported one, or are you going to
probably?
Are you going to pop for a little bit more just so you don't get commercials?
Maybe I'll try to entice Warner Brothers Discovery to give me a test run for 12 months or something. See how
Not
we
a
go.
bad idea. No, that's fair. That's fair.
All right. So looking elsewhere, I mentioned action figures early on. Some big news in the action figure world for DC Comics. Mattel is back with a new deal, joining DC for getting the license for the upcoming upcoming action figures. This is kind of big news because it means McFarlane's out.
At least until next year, McFarlane will still be around, from what I understand. There was a toy convention this weekend, and he was talking about it. He's at least through the Superman film and all that. I'm mixed on this because I think Mattel had some really good action figures, and they had some action figures where, again, the face molds looked really weird. There was a time period where if they had a Superman figure, he had this like really oblong face with a pointy chin that I wasn't a big fan of. I think my biggest problem, though, with the Mattel stuff was the distribution. Whenever I would go to the store, like getting new figures were not restocked. New figures didn't always make it to the big chains like Walmart and Target. There was a point at the one Walmart near me where for like literally 16 months, all they had was Suicide Squad figures from the first movie. And so Mattel just doesn't have a really good reputation in that. So they may have some cool figures, but how are you going to get them? And it's a problem with a lot of toy companies now, but Mattel particularly had a problem with that with their DC stuff.
Yeah, interesting. So this takes effect in the second half of 2026, as you mentioned. So it'll be interesting to see if their distribution model has changed since they did have the DC license. But Mark, are you big into buying action figures? Like I know Michael gets out there and gets some.
I'm not. No, I do remember them though. I mean,
Yeah,
I
of
certainly
course.
remember the figures. But I just for some reason I just never got into collecting, any action figures, and I look back on it now and say, why? I don't. I have absolutely no idea why. It's never too late, of course, but I certainly remember them when they came out, but I just never really collected them.
But so big news. Interesting that licenses have changed, and it'll be interesting to see what McFarlane Toys does come out with until while their license is still in place and what they've got manufactured and up and coming as far as releases are concerned, and then what Mattel brings out and how they compare as far as the quality is concerned, because there have been some people complaining about, especially some of the head models for some of the McFarlane Toys action figures. I think maybe the recent release of the Fleischer one was probably the best one they've done, and others before that have been quite wonky.
Yeah.
All right. Before we wrap up, don't forget the Superman's homepage Super Trivia Quiz has been updated for the beginning of a new month, and the 3 questions we're asking you this time around are all related to Michael's favorite film of all time, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. The 3 questions are, in the movie Batman v Superman, what object does Lois Lane find that proves Superman wasn't responsible for killing everyone during the attack in Africa? The second question is, what phrase is spray painted on the Superman statue in Heroes Park? And what Greek mythological figure does Lex Luthor compare himself to during his speech at his party? So if you think you know the answers to those 3 questions, don't say anything in the comments now. Go to supermanhomepage.com/trivia, fill out the form, send your entry in, and the names of each person who guesses those 3 questions correctly will have their name in the never-ending battlers list when we renew the Super Trivia Quiz for the month after that. So get involved in the Superman Homepage Super Trivia Quiz. As I mentioned, just go to supermanhomepage.com/trivia. All right, Michael, Mark, anything you guys want to touch on before we wrap up tonight's show? Anything happening in the world of Superman that's come across your desk?
Not really. We're in kind of a holding pattern.
Yeah.
They just had all the announcements for like the summer of Superman, so we just had the solicits, and I'm sure. I mean, we've got the fact that they are doing 2 new Marvel DC crossovers, but there's no details on what exactly those specials are going to be.
Which is why you haven't heard them announced on a website yet, because there's just no official information.
So, and we're getting closer to convention season, so I'm sure they're going to want to do it at one of the big conventions to kind of like roll that out. So it's just like one of those things where some weeks are like this, some weeks are diamonds, and some weeks are stone. I mean, sometimes the Superman news gods deliver, and sometimes they are cruel taskmasters. So
we don't even have a Superman comic book this week. It was supposed to be Absolute Superman number 5 was supposed to be solicited for this week, but I think it's been pushed back for next week. But we did have Superman Space Age trade paperback and the Multiverses Collision Detected trade paperback, or hardcover, but no new Superman comic book itself out this week, which again just makes another quieter week again.
Yeah, you can't even pimp out like the reviews and stuff.
Next week you get Action, which I'm really, really waiting for once we get into the summer of Superman, because I don't want to get into anything, but some of these stories by the superstars,
right,
have just not been very good. I mean, they're enjoyable, they have their moments, but some of them have just been kind of, thankfully, Mark Waid came in with Phantoms, and we had the, Brainiac and all of that. But some of these superstar stories aren't so great. So really, really waiting to go towards the summer of Superman.
Yeah, indeed. All right, folks. Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's episode. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to Superman Homepage Live. Thanks for spending the past hour with us tonight. We really appreciate your company. Thanks once again to our sponsors and patrons. I've got to bring up their names so I can remember the new gentlemen: Rick Schertzow, Douglas Meacham, John Patrick Van Pelt, and Tina Murray. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you to my 2 co-hosts, Michael Bailey, Mark Lax. Thank you, guys.
Pleasure as always,
Michael.
Steve.
And the 3 of us will be back next week on Monday, March 10th, for another edition of Superman Homepage Live at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time. Hope you'll join us then. Until then, be sure to check out supermanhomepage.com for all your daily news updates on everything surrounding the Man of Steel. If you missed part of tonight's show, tuned in late, want to check it out all over again in full, you can do so both at our YouTube channel and on supermanhomepage.com. But for tonight, thank you so much for your company. We'll see you next week. I'm Steve Eunice. On behalf of myself, Michael, and Mark, thanks for watching Superman Homepage Live. Good night.